welcome back. I am Natasha, the millennial, and I am here with Anthony, the grandpa.
Thanks, Natasha. Excited to be back. Last week we did an interview, and we're on to our second interview, and I'm really excited to introduce Mitch Bradley, who I've known for a little over 20 years, one of my oldest and best friends, and also one of my mentors that I've talked throughout my career about career pathing and just getting guidance from him. So I'm excited. He's an executive sales leader, over 25 years of experience. So welcome, Mitch. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony and Natasha, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll jump into this. We'll get right into your story.
Yeah, so most recently, was senior vice president of sales and marketing for an enterprise software sales company, SaaS software, in kind of the government space. So selling to local government and county government primarily, and good sized company, probably 150 employees, and doing about 40 million in revenue, kind of in that ballpark area.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you being here. We want to hear your story. So tell us your story. Start where you want to start, and then we're going to jump in and ask questions along the way.
Sure. So, just kind of, I guess, going all the way back to my youth, and I won't spend a ton of time on that, but, grew up in a small town, a one high school town, where you kind of knew everybody. Your parents knew everybody. It was hard to get away with things because it was a small town.
Yeah, I bet.
But didn't really know any different. When you're kind of growing up in that environment, you just think that's what everything's like. And when I was in high school, my parents actually divorced while I was in high school, which, was one of those life events that, was like, wow, like I didn't think parents got divorced. I didn't understand this. And I didn't have any friends with divorced parents. So it was this very kind of like challenging time. And I think I hindsight 2020, I was a little bit of a rebel in those later years, and was, living with mom and could kind of get away with anything. And, but, looking back, it was very effective on me in that I had a mother that worked very hard, and like I saw that and I was around that, and you couldn't really escape it when it was just the two of us. And she taught me a lot in those later years. If you would have asked me in high school, what I wanted to be, I would have told you a mechanic. I was also, I have a personality where I like to break things down and really understand how they work, whether it be a sales process or whether it's something mechanical. And I was very, into kind of cars and mechanics at the time. And again, if you would have asked me, where I was going to go to college, I would have just said I'm not. Like, that wasn't ever on my radar until I was graduating high school and kind of had a father that said, you're going to college. Like, it's not something you're not going to not do. And because I grew up in Northern Nevada, I went to school at the University of Nevada, Reno. It was just kind of like the no-brainer option. Almost everybody I knew was going to go to school there. Didn't apply anywhere else. Got into school and continued just to have a lot of fun, and wasn't really taking it too serious. And then you kind of learn pretty quickly in college, like, you either do well or you go home. And I didn't want to go home because it was too much fun. So I started actually studying and bounced around a lot of different majors, trying to figure out what it was I really wanted to do. And through all those paths, stumbled across GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, which is essentially generating maps from computerized data, very intelligent maps. We all think of like Google Maps today, but this was the foundation of kind of those technologies. And it was really interesting to me, again, because it was, really understanding how that would work and how you could make these very advanced decisions using spatial data. And I ended up getting my degree in that and got out of school and couldn't find work.
How'd you?
It was.
Mitch, can I
Yep.
ask you, so you said you stumbled upon it. Was that just trying different classes? Like, how did you come across that from mechanic, right, to this? How'd that happen?
It's a great question. So the story goes, yes, I was just kind of randomly taking classes, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I took a geography class, which was really just like an elective, like a course I had to take anyway. So I was getting it out of the way. And my professor was a younger, new professor, I think in his like second or third year. And he was very into GIS and was doing a study on pollen. And he was collecting pollen samples all over the Western US, actually, and then putting them into this computer model that would map it. And he was trying to like really understand the climate going way back, millions of years based on pollen. So he had a summer project where you could kind of sign up to basically help him go collect data and then do a lot of data entry of entering all this data. So I was doing it for money and was like, what are we doing now? And he's like, just fill in all these like spreadsheets and all this data. And I'm like, okay, this is like really painfully boring. But then once it was done, he started like generating these maps showing how like plants have moved around because of where he could find pollen. And I was like, how is this working? And again, my mind kind of always wanting to understand how things work. He was explaining to me GIS. And I was like, this is amazing. This is really, really cool. I ended up actually doing a project when I was in school that was fictional, but it was a lot of fun in that if you were to build a railroad to go from like northern Nevada all the way down to Las Vegas, and that rail line had all these rules, like it could never go be on a slope of more than a certain percentage. It couldn't be within so many miles of a lake. It couldn't be within so many miles of a town or a freeway, et cetera, et cetera. Put in all these parameters, and you could actually kind of watch the computer back then think and try to figure out a route that would work as it kept kind of processing all this data. Today, it would happen in a split second just because of the processing powers so much more. But it was just so fun to kind of understand how, this computer technology is going to start making all kinds of decisions for us. Today, you get in a car and you plug in a route and it tells you how to get there and you don't really think twice about it. But, there was a lot behind that to get to where it is today.
That's really cool. I have a question on the individual that introduced you. Did you stay in touch with him? Do you consider him somebody who inspired you, or you just stumbled across him?
He was, I haven't kept in touch with him, which is, shame on me. But he was just, I would say, one of those like better professors that I had in school that you like kind of connected with, and it was a similar interest. He was interested in it, and as I learned, I ended up taking 3 or 4 classes from him through the process of getting my degree. But I really should track him down and look him up because, that is one of those, and there's a few like points in my life or career that I really know influenced, what I did with the rest of it.
So did you know then that he was having that powerful of an impact, or were you just going through school like, this is really cool and this is a great guy?
Yeah.
It wasn't until you look back?
I would say I had no idea at the time, right? It was more of like, oh, I finally found something about college that's interesting to me. Everything else was just work. And I was doing it to stay there because the nightlife and the weekends were a lot of fun and I don't want to go home. And then all of a sudden school became this thing of like where I didn't want to leave the computer lab or I didn't want to leave the library. It was like I was enjoying learning a very, new technology. And he introduced me to it. So
yeah, it's really cool. It's one of the reasons why we wanted to have these conversations is, someone in your position and him at that time, we have impacts on other people and you don't even know, and they don't know, and then talking to you, 30 years later, changed your whole life and the trajectory of your life. Fascinating.
Yeah, for sure.
Fascinating.
But so, I ended up getting my degree in geography, GIS technology, and went out to try to find work. And it was at a time where I think the technology was new to a lot of companies. There was a lot of interest in it, but nobody really had jobs. It was, I got a lot of like, we'd love to hire you as an intern. And because we kind of want to play around with that and see if that's something we can use. And it's like, not paid intern, just like intern. And I ended up really just out of kind of like path of least resistance going to work for the state of Nevada in the Department of Transportation that it was a job that I kind of worked in the summers. I had some family members that worked for the DOT. Nevada is a small place, so that helps. And ended up getting a job in their pavement kind of department. And they have the Department of Transportation, a huge department, but within it, they had a very small group that was just very focused on really determining like the right way to make pavement for every section of state highway, in the state. And it varies drastically. For those that don't know Nevada, it's not all Las Vegas, right? Las Vegas is in our south of the state, very warm, extreme, very hot summers. And then you get to northern Nevada, where if you could see out my window right now, I'm looking out, to 3 feet of snow, and I live in Reno. And so pavement behaves differently, where it's very cold or very hot. And there's a lot of engineering that goes into that. So it was in this kind of engineering group, but I saw the opportunity to like map all of the roads and start tracking their condition in a database, right? And being able to actually generate maps and do some intelligent management of that pavement using GIS technology. And again, the state was like, wow, that's really high tech stuff. That's really new.
Whoa, calm it down.
And not to age myself, but at the time, like we had one laptop in the department. There was like 8 of us, and we had to share it, right?
Yeah, because you aged yourself.
That was like without a computer.
Wow.
So, but in my youth, I was, very energized about this and was like, I'm going to make this happen. And I found a company that was headquartered in Sacramento, California, and was saying, hey, I want to help you sell your software to the state of Nevada. And it was kind of this software package that wrapped around GIS technology and kind of helped state DOTs or large counties manage pavement. Excuse me. And after probably about a year of trying to kind of be this champion for them within the DOT to get that sale done, I couldn't get it done. But I got to know this company really well, and they said, hey, why don't you come to work for us? And I was like, wow, that's an interesting idea. Way out of my comfort zone, which is another thing that I kind of learned. I'll talk about a little bit. But they were like, yeah, move to Sacramento, work for us. We just signed a really big contract with the state of California, Caltrans, and we want you to help us work on that project. And I'm like, man, I'm born and raised in northern Nevada, grew up in a small town, never ventured too far away from there. All of my family was here, and you want me to move to California, which, again, if you're from Nevada, is like this evil state to our west. And but I was like, you know what? Like, yeah, that sounds like a challenge. I should, I'd be a fool to kind of pass up on this opportunity. And remember just kind of coming home and like I had some roommates at the time and told them, hey guys, I'm out of here. Like I'm moving over the mountain, packed up my stuff and, pretty, quick order was living in Sacramento, working for this new company, didn't know a soul.
How old were you?
I was 20, probably 26 at the time.
Okay.
25, 26, somewhere in there.
So it's a big move.
And,
did you consider? I don't want to cut you up. Did you consider it like a bold move at the time, or just?
Oh, I was scared to death. Yeah, but my options, at the time, I was very frustrated working for the Nevada DOT, and I think working for the state is a great thing. My father was retired from the state of Nevada, but it just moved so slow. And I wanted to change things. I wanted to try things. Let's do something new. And it was like Eric showing up to work every day. And it was like, no, this is how we do it here. We don't do new things. But I'll talk about it in a second. But I had one of the best managers I've ever had at the DOT that I didn't also realize at the time. But kind of later in my career, like some things that she said to me really started to resonate. But I moved to Sacramento. And this company was like, oh, man, we're great to have you on board. You're going to be the project manager for our project with Caltrans. And I was like, okay. And I think Google was like brand new around that time or, internet searches. And I remember having to kind of like research, like, what's a project manager do? Because I was like completely out of my comfort zone. And luckily I got paired up with a Deloitte Consulting, a big five kind of firm, was part of this project. And I even though we were kind of our own company, we sort of kind of reported to them in the structure, which was great because they had some very senior people involved, and it was another great learning experience for me. Where actually one of the individuals, his name was Rich Radden. I don't know what, I think his name's just so cool, like Rich Rad. Never forget it. But he taught me right away, like we got in there and the project was off to a really rocky start. One, it was the biggest 10x size project that this company had ever won. Everything they had done before that was like maybe a large county, but like to walk into Caltrans, which had 12 districts, each of the districts operated independently of each other. And this project was meant to consolidate everything they did into one software package and get them doing everything consistently. And so when you walk into a district, especially when you're a 26, 27-year-old kid and you're like, hey, senior person that's been working here for 30 years, you're going to start doing stuff different tomorrow. You're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
They were like, get out of here, kid.
Been there.
Really tough. And it was very frustrating because I'm like, God, I see all the value, but they didn't see the value. And that was, again, kind of a learning lesson in that you can't just tell people what to do, even if it's like the right thing.
Yeah.
You got to kind of like lead them to the water and help them see that. And this guy, Rich, used to always teach me, Mitch, you're getting too close to the project. Like this thing you're getting too personal with it. It's like you have to be able to step back, like pretend like you're sitting on the other side of the room and the project's over there to your left, and you're looking at it from a distance and observe it and what's working, what's not working, where are the problems, then like go solve the problems. But you're not the problem, and the success you can't think of the success or failure of a project as your success or failure. It's the project. You're just this thing that's managing it, and get away from it and look at it as something across the room. And to this day, I do that when there's a really challenging problem and I feel like you feel your chest kind of get tight and you're like, oh, like frustrated. And I'm like, I'm too close, and just like mentally back away from it and look at it over there and be like, okay, I see what's going on. I need to go fix these things, but don't, you can't be inside of it and see all that. So.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective. I think all of us from time to time have identified with a project or a position, and it really has nothing to do with us. You're solving the problem. So it's a great point.
Oh, I think you're speaking right to me right now. I'm like, oh, that is me. Like, you look at it like it's commitment, because I do take it personally, but you're right, sometimes to a fault. So that's fantastic advice.
Yeah, it was great, and it's something that just always stuck with me. But long story short, the project ended up being a wild success. It was very successful for the company I was working for. In one project, I think it almost like doubled the size of the company. And then the company really started to take off because it got this kind of national recognition from having success with the state of California, which is kind of like, if you can do it there, you can kind of do it anywhere. And I came back to the company because I was really kind of working almost remote. I was working out of Caltrans offices for probably 3 years. And so then the project was done, and I went back to their headquarters, and, I remember just kind of walking through the halls and people were like, who's this guy? And I'm like, I've been here longer than you, but I just never came to this office. And, the management team there was like, hey, Mitch, that was fantastic. We're starting to get more and more projects. We want you to like oversee all of our projects. And it was like, okay, like just sounds kind of like the same, but bigger. But what I didn't really realize at the time was I'm going from like managing a project to like managing really people. And had no training in that. Nobody had ever kind of like coached me up. It just kind of like, hey, tomorrow all of a sudden you have 12 direct reports, and they all have 3 or 4 projects that are managing, and we need you to like stay on top of all that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna pause right there. It happens a lot, right? You're top performer, which is what you were. All of a sudden gets put into a leadership team with people that you've never had that before. So yeah, walk us through. I want to hear how this goes.
Yeah, well, and so the guy that I sort of replaced, because they were kind of reorganizing the company at the time. But essentially, all these people reported to someone else before they reported to me. And it was more of a culture of like, I'm the boss, you're the worker, I tell you what to do, you go do the work. And when I came in, I didn't even really know that, because I hadn't been around it that much. I was always working on this like other project. But I came in and I think I had more of a personality of like, hey guys, like we're all in this together. And what I learned relatively quickly is like some people that works really well. Others were taking advantage of me. Yeah. And it was like, oh, like all of a sudden, we can get away with stuff. And I trusted that people like would show up to work and work hard and all these things that you want, which to this day I still kind of probably have that fault, that like my default position is I expect that people are going to work hard, do their job, and I don't have to worry about those things, but not always the case.
So your style, right? So that's the way you work. So when you took over a team, you expect everyone to do things the way that you're doing them.
Yeah, I couldn't live with the guilt of like trying to like get around work, and I don't understand how others can, but they're out there. But what really so there was an individual working for me at this company, and basically a peer level position had opened up in the company, and this was one of my top performers, and I was recommending, I'm like, hey, trying to get this person this job. And they did. And it caught, like a lot of people came to me and be like, why would you have that? Why would you have him like promote out of that position? Like that left you this huge hole that you're going to have to go deal with. And what a hassle, right? And I was kind of like, why wouldn't I do that? Like, what a horrible person am I if I'm like, no, like you can't advance because I need you working for me because you're going to be hard to replace. And what it really came from was when I going all the way back to the state of Nevada, my kind of boss's boss there, a great lady, her name was Sohila, and she used to always have this saying that she wanted to hire the next director of the state of Nevada. And I remember like hearing her say it several times and finally going to her and like, I don't even understand what you're trying to, like, what do you mean? And she's like, oh, as a manager and a leader of people, like the most, the best thing I could ever do is be the one that found the talent and hired the next person that's going to like move up through this org and run the whole department someday. Like if I could be the person that hired that person, it's powerful. It'd be awesome. And I'm like, yeah, I was like, that is a really cool way to look at it. And to think, that it's not like, I don't want to hire great people, so I move up the org. Like, if that happens, great. If not, but can I hire people and help them move up the organization? And even if it means moving, above me. I remember when this. Go ahead, Natasha.
Sorry. Yeah, if I can ask, because it's an interesting point. I think sometimes to your point, is you hire that great person or you develop them, and then there's the chance that they surpass you. So there's might be some looking at that as some type of competition. So you didn't have any of those thoughts, or did your perspective on that change, or you just knew like, yeah, great, if they're better than me, then, or if we can get them there, then awesome?
I think it was just like ingrained in me early that you want the best people like moving up. And I wasn't thinking about the problem it was going to create for me. I was just so happy that I could help this person like move up in the organization and that the company would be in a better spot. Within my group, yeah, I'm going to have a hole to fill and that's going to be a challenge. I'm going to have to figure it out, but the company is going to be in a better spot. And I kind of took a lot of pride in that. Like I had this person working for me for a couple of years. I know I taught him a few things, and here he was like moving up. And I don't know, it's like that gave me more pride than, worrying about the problem that I was going to have to deal with. And I've, been fortunate enough to have been able to do that, a few times throughout my career. And in a couple of cases, I've never really kind of wanted this, but it's actually been the person leaving the company. And they left to go get a better position somewhere else. And, it like stings because you're like, oh, like I hate to see someone leave, and I enjoyed working with that person. But I would always just step back and like be like, Mitch, celebrate it, because if that person's doing what's best for them and their family and their career, and you helped that happen, you should take some pride in that, even if it means, they left the organization.
Absolutely. I would imagine as you look back through your career, and I know we're still close to the middle, but when you look back, those people that you've helped and the relationships you've built are incredibly strong because you took that approach. And you're probably still in touch with a lot of those people, or still work with them, or they come back into your working environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've learned just through experience too, that the industry I'm in is a little bit of a niche industry, and you kind of see this cross-pollination of people constantly going on. So yeah, I've had people that worked for me. Later years, I've worked for them or worked with them, and vice versa, and kind of see a lot of moving around. So I think, at the end of the day, treat people, fairly, and it'll pay off, dividends down the road.
Yeah, no, I'd say at least it's working. On the other side of that, and when you look at, I would never want to call anybody out, but when you look on either immature leaders or leaders that haven't developed, or on the backside of that, it's a small, and all of our industries are small. So if you have a leader that's not working that way, 10 years down the road, you walk into an interview or you go to a meeting on the board and trying to get something through, and people are going to remember Mitch for helping them move their career up, but you're also going to remember the person who didn't help somebody or was a roadblock. And it can also hurt you if you're not a good leader, or if you're reporting to a leader that's not good.
And I've had that experience too. After the company in Sacramento, I kind of switched to a competitive company in the Bay Area. So I spent about 10 years in Sacramento. I was still living in Sacramento, working remote for this company in the Bay Area for about another 10, 11 years, where I really kind of grew my sales management career. They brought me in. They were a bigger company, probably twice the size, and was in several different sales management positions while I was there. So I kind of got this pretty well-rounded experience. And towards the end, they went on a little bit of an acquisition spree, and we acquired, I think it was 9 different companies in about a 16, 18-month period. All like complementing software packages. And so it was a real challenge to be a seller in that environment, because it was constantly changing. Things were constantly being kind of added to your portfolio of products to go sell. And customers were constantly asking, how does all this work together? So trying to enable a sales team with this rapid change taking place, trying to figure out what the messaging to the market would be. And I ended up getting put in a position over really just what they called sales support, but it included sales enablement, product demonstration, and then like any of our kind of written sales materials. So it's like 3 smaller teams that were reporting to me. And that was a significant challenge. But again, a lot of fun trying to like pull all this together.
Was it fun then? Was it fun then, or is it fun looking back?
It's more fun looking back. But I think at the time it was, I probably had, been with that company, and I guess my job was starting to get a little boring. And then this happened. And so it was this real kind of shot in the arm for me, because I was like, well, at least I got some new stuff to work on. And again, my kind of mechanical mind was like, oh, like I get to figure out how all this stuff is going to work together. Like, what a fun puzzle to work on. And I ended up having some success there. And then we looked to go buy another company, and the deal didn't happen. But it was a really cool software package, and I really wanted the company to buy it. And, we couldn't get the deal done, but they were sold. And a couple of months go by, and I get a call from a recruiter, and they were like, hey, we're representing this software company that was headquartered in the Midwest. And they're looking for somebody to come in and run all of their sales and marketing. And I just asked the recruiter, I'm like, hey, was it, company X that we had looked at? And he was like, how do you know that?
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, well, you told me enough about it. I know this market. There's not that many software companies headquartered in the Midwest. And I'm like, I absolutely want the job. So after a few months of kind of negotiating, that was, again, another kind of huge leap for me. I was very comfortable where I was at. I was making really good money. I had a great team. I had fun things to work on. But, I'd come home and complain to the wife that, oh man, like I wish I was in charge of all of sales and marketing. I would do things this way. Oh, our leader today made this horrible decision and now I have to like listen to it. And it's kind of like, hey, when you get the opportunity, you can't complain that, and then the opportunity is on your doorstep and you don't take it. So I was like, I'm going to give this a shot. I think I can do it. And again, just great decision. But shortly after that, I actually read, I think it was a documentary. I think there's also a book, but I think I didn't read the book. I just watched the documentary. But it's on, and you, Anthony, you probably know this name, Dawn Staley.
I do, yeah.
You know,
I know that
yeah.
name.
So she's this amazing basketball coach that had all this great success. And in this documentary, she had these like 5 things that she lived by, but one of them was like to be uncomfortable as much as possible. And her thing is when you're uncomfortable, you're growing, and you've got to push yourself into these, out of your comfort zone as much as you can if you really want to grow as a person. And I was like, wow, like I'm really proud of myself. I did that when I moved to Sacramento. Like that's kind of the instinct that was in me when I took this last job, because I wanted to feel pushed. I wanted to feel challenged. And I remember like getting in front of the whole like sales and marketing team for the first time when I was there, and they're like, who's this guy? But just telling them like, hey, here's what I'm doing. And like, I encourage all of you to do the same thing. Like, when was the last time you were uncomfortable? And it was kind of, weird. They're like, well, what are you talking about? And I'm like, when was the last time you walked into a department that you've never walked, at one of our customer sites, and like walked into a group you've never talked to before and talked to them, or attempted a sales presentation, maybe slightly different than what you've always rinsed and repeated every time, and like tried new things and tested, and it's uncomfortable to do that, but like you'll learn and you'll become, better at your job. And so the setup here is that after kind of all of that, probably about 70% of them all left.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, that didn't work.
So Mitch, real quick,
yep.
Can we go? So I think if I can ask a couple probing questions in that. So you moved from project management into sales, which I feel like is quite different. Like the idea of sales and what it's about, and oftentimes, I guess in my experience, there's both. But sometimes if you aren't about sales, or you don't have the kind of right ideas about sales, it's kind of like, hey, no, we do this in the back. It just could be different. So was that a leap or a change for you, or did you feel like that was an easy transition into that? I feel like those are quite different.
Yeah, that's a great catch, because I kind of glossed over that a little bit. It was really on the project side. So I was with that first company I was with in Sacramento. I really got to know the product really well, like to the point where I was kind of, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think I was probably one of the deepest product experts the company had when I finished that project at Caltrans. And when I kind of came back and I got put in charge of all projects, I started kind of going out on these customer visits, and I would see what our salespeople were doing in front of the customer and just be like, oh, this is like painful to watch. And so I would start coaching them like on the spot, like, no, that doesn't actually work that way. Let me show you how that really works. And then it started to be a little bit of like, move over, sales guy. Let me show the customer how this works. And then word started getting back like, wow, Mitch is really good in front of customers. Like he knows the product inside and out, and like he can talk to like what the software value actually is and like why you would buy it. And so kind of without knowing it, I was like teaching salespeople how to sell. And I didn't even think of myself as a salesperson. I was just like, you got it. It was common sense to me. Explain to them why they would pay money for this. Like, what's the value to them? Quit just showing them features. And so that kind of was my introduction to sales, like without knowing it. And then all of a sudden I knew I was doing a good job because every salesperson we had was like trying to book me on all their trips. Like, Mitch, I got a sales call. You're coming with me.
Hey, come with.
I'm like, I got a different job. Yeah, I'm like, I'm not doing that.
I think it's fascinating because so many people, myself included, I didn't think I was a salesperson either. And to find yourself in it, I think if you're passionate about what you're doing, and if it's a product, right, you're interested in it, you know it in and out, and all of a sudden that becomes, you don't even know that you're selling, or so I can see kind of where the bridge is the gap is bridged, however that goes.
Yeah. And the software that I've always kind of been involved with is, again, always kind of been around this GIS technology, and then, ultimately grew into a software package that public works departments are using to manage all the infrastructure that they're responsible for. So I always tell you, it's all the stuff that nobody ever like thinks about, right? You wake up in the morning, you expect your water to turn on, you expect your toilet to flush. Driving to work, you expect the road to be smooth, no potholes, all the traffic signals, you expect those to be working. The stop signs are going to be where they're supposed to be, all those. Well, there's whole departments that worry about all that. And it's all this kind of engineering, mechanical stuff. So it was always really interesting to me that that's all out there, and you got to worry about it, and it's got to be maintained. And, it has all these different schedules. And there's a way to optimize how you do maintenance on all these things. So it has always been something I've been very interested in and passionate about. So anyways, I mean, that was kind of the leap over and exposure to sales. And then when I kind of switched companies after that, I had first gone over to be more of a product expert for the new company. And then kind of the same thing happened, like, got to know the software really well, and then pretty soon it's like everybody wants to put me in front of the customer. But what I learned was selling in kind of this enterprise software space. One is very much around perception. So I actually gone through a couple different trainings that's around how to like present information and how people absorb that detail. And you can get in front of an audience and say all the right things, but if you do it in kind of the wrong way, it doesn't mean they're going to like actually hear it. So I started doing a lot of training with our sales teams on how to present information and how to like break it into nice consumable chunks of information that the audience can absorb and remember. And, that just drives to, better success in selling.
So did you study, Mitch? Did you read books? Did you study, or I mean, it sounds like you're a natural, but there has to be some work in the background and understanding psychology of the sale, the process.
Yeah, it's a lot of reading. I've got shelves and shelves of sales books, but you read enough of those, you kind of realize they're all pretty much saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. But it's good to hear it from different points of view. But then there's been two really kind of key trainings, and I don't think either of these people would mind a plug. So one of them is called The Great Demo. And it's, and I've told them this before, it's kind of the worst name because it's really not just about doing a great demo. Like, that's one thing, but they have a really great training and methodology on how people retain information. And they kind of, teach that principle that it's not what you say or even what you document, it's what their perception was of what you said and what they read. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what they're going to make a decision.
Interesting.
On.
Yeah. So a lot of that kind of psychology there. And then the other is a company called the Culture Index, which actually would probably be a great guest for you guys at some point. But that's very much about how to understand the kind of different personality profiles that people have. And what's interesting about the work that they do is we use this internally at a couple of the companies I work for, but you go through some kind of extensive surveys and they essentially say, hey, Mitch, at work, you're this person. And away from work, you're this person. And we're all kind of that way.
Yeah.
And then you look at how far apart those are. And some people are very far apart. And they're usually people that are very stressed out at work because you have to like shift who you are from this like position A over to position B. And the farther those things are apart, the more stressful that is on somebody. So perfect world, you're kind of similar at home to what you have to be at work. And you will have less stress. But anybody can like shift. And we all have it. I'm two different profiles. Like at home, I'm, one person. At work. I think Anthony, you mentioned this on one of your guys' other podcasts. You're an introvert. So am I. I'm absolutely an introvert. I've tested it so many different ways, and it always comes back like, yep, you're an introvert. But at work, I can't be. The job doesn't allow it. But it stresses me out, and like I get home and I'm tired, right? Because it's exhausting for me to be this other person. But it's just something we all do.
I have a question there because I've gone through some similar, so Myers-Briggs, and there's a couple out there, the personality tests. So as I listen to you talk about that and understanding yourself, how did you apply that, or how do you apply that in your leadership in understanding your people and teams?
Yeah, so we use it a lot for team building. Now, I have never, when we would hire, we would have people fill out the profile, and you could kind of say like this position, you're looking for these characteristics. But I didn't lean on it too much there because I don't know, I just feel like it's a little bit like witchcraft to like use it for like hiring decisions.
Yeah.
But once you actually get to meet somebody and work with them for a while, you could kind of like, okay, I kind of understand why they're matching here. And then when we would put teams together internally to solve a problem, we would use it extensively there because you can put the wrong people together and say, you three go work on this. Well, if you got the wrong, mixture there, they're not going to be they're not going to work well together. So we would kind of look at it from, let's get different angles, and then you could kind of look at the profile and like, okay, we need a good note taker in the group. You need someone that's the idea guy, and kind of create a team using that information to help go solve problems. And it really helped us in that area.
And so along those lines, what are your thoughts as you're putting that type of team together in healthy conflict? Is it something you believe in?
I guess it depends on the extent of conflict
or disagreement, healthy disagreement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's I would even just say it's just different points of view, right? And if everybody just kind of went in a room and quickly agreed on something, I'd be concerned.
And are there times that you would match those different personalities up to say we need to make sure that we have both sides of both points of view, one so that we have some disagreement or we have some debate?
Yeah, and we would. And it's not just personality though, but that might be more from like a departmental point of view. Like sometimes we may be having roadmap product discussions. Like what are the next 10 things we're going to build? And we've got 200 ideas. Well, you got to kind of pull people that are going to be affected by those decisions from different groups, and then make sure that mixture of people is a good mixture to work well together as a unit.
Got it. So we kind of started going down a couple rabbit holes. So is there more in your journey, or can we dive into questions with you? We want to make sure we get it all out.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, that was pretty much the path to, how I kind of grew into a, senior vice president of sales and marketing role. And again, in my youth, I never would have like suggested that was going to be my career path. And even probably every step of the way through it, I didn't kind of know what the next, what was through the next door. But I, give my parents a lot of credit. They instilled in me early a really good work ethic. And I've always just kind of thought, like, work hard and good things happen. And I tell employees that all the time. I tell my kids that. I get all kinds of eye rolls, but I really do believe in that. That, my father I worked at a lumber yard when I was really young, my very first job. And I remember coming home kind of complaining to him that they're not asking me to do very much. And he's like, well, what do you mean? Like, one, you're 14. Like, what do you think they're going to have you do? Like, balance the, checkbook or something? But I'm like, I don't know. I'm like taking out the trash and like mopping and like this, and he goes, tell you what, take that trash out better than it's ever been taken out. Mop that floor better than it's ever been mopped. And you do those things, and I bet you won't be doing them very long. And like, that made no, and I kind of did that. And next thing I knew, it's like, hey, we can ask this kid to do anything and he'll do a great job of it. Let's have him do more important things. And I think that applies, to every position out there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And one of the things I always say is attitude and effort along those lines. Those are the two things that you can control. So I know we have a lot of questions. Natasha, you want to start? You want me to jump in?
So I would say what's been, and it's so hard to summarize, but what's been one of the hardest lessons you've learned as a leader in your career?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think, I guess I've never, this is going to sound a little weird, but I've never like woke up the morning and thought like, I need to go lead people today. I just always felt like I had a job to do, and my job was like removing friction from the work that others had to do. Right. And so it was just my job and they had their job. And I didn't think of myself as like leading them, but instead like listening to them and getting rid of what's in their way. Right. So they can be successful. So to answer, the question, for me, it's been that kind of maybe not actually there are times where I guess I should have thought of myself as a leader and probably behaved a little bit differently, but you have to kind of own it once you have the title and the role. And I didn't always do that. And so it took me some time to like understand that everybody's looking at me as their leader, even though I'm not waking up in the morning and going, Leader Mitch just woke up.
Yeah, very true.
So just being very self-aware of how others are looking at, looking at you and what you're doing and your actions.
Yeah. And you've worked, it sounds like, across a lot of different teams. You made a comment that some left at one point. What do you say about the people who aren't a good fit? So for me, I have this idea, right, that everyone, I'm like, I could break through to everyone. We can make the best out of it. And I've had to learn like, oh man, we've really given it a go. Like we've done everything we can and it's just not a fit. So in all of those teams and different personalities and different projects, when somebody wasn't a fit or a team wasn't a fit or you weren't a fit, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that can be a tough situation, right? I think, step one for me is making sure that they understand what they're being asked to do. And they have clarity on that and how they're being measured. And then making sure they understand like what their performance is. And I have had situations where someone's like, oh, like I didn't realize X or Y. And I actually have seen like an improvement in performance and a change and been like, oh, there was kind of like something I thought was going to be a problem averted and everything's better. 90% of the time that doesn't happen and there's something else going on. But step two for me is then kind of really trying to understand like why, what's the root cause? I've had very challenging times in my life. Like I went through my mother passed away a little over a year ago, and the year leading up to that was very hard, right? She was very sick, and I was doing that in the evenings and working in the day. And I'm sure my performance was impacted during that period. So I try to keep that in mind. And if someone's performance is suffering, like really pull them aside and try to find out like, what's the root cause? Is this some kind of temporary distraction, or, are they just not up to the job? And if I ultimately determine like, no, there's no, problem at home or something that needs to be solved, or they have clarity, then I really have pretty quick comfort in like making separation from somebody. Again, I think it's in most cases the best thing for the company as well as that person. Now there may be emotion at the time and they're not too happy about it, but I mean, I have terminated people that have watched their careers, and in a couple of years they land somewhere else and they have great success and they do really well. And if you would have just kind of tried to like keep them around or continue to work, you probably would have just hampered that. So again, as a leader, I think sometimes you have to realize this is a bad situation, and if it's not going to go anywhere positive, the faster you can make the decision, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, that's true. Took me a little time. Still working on it.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean,
yeah.
Those are not days you ever want to relive. But again, you just hope that down the road that person's going to have success, and I think in most cases they do.
Yeah. And the ones that look back and like, oh, it didn't work out, but I see what he or she was saying, or I see why it didn't work out. At least,
Yeah,
that's what I tell myself.
So I'm going to piggyback on that. I'm going to piggyback on that question, Mitch. So life is messy. It's complicated. We all have life. It comes at us in different ways. So as you've had that happen, you talked about your mom, and you've had a long career. When you're having the ups are easy to deal with, right? But it's the downs. How do you manage or balance the life-work balance with whether it's the stress at work and bringing that home or not bringing that home, or the stress at home and not bringing it to work?
I don't know if I do a great job of it, to be honest. It's a really hard thing. To add to that, for the last 15 years, I've worked from home. So
you were ahead of us.
I have friends.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I have friends to this day that will call me on a Tuesday at noon and be like, "Hey, dude, let's go hit some golf balls or whatever." And I was like, "I'm working." They're like, "Yeah, but you work from home." And I'm like, "What? I don't even know what that means." Like, yeah, I work from home. I'm not just home doing nothing. Like, I can't just blow off work, but they don't comprehend it. And so the reason I say that is it makes it even harder at times when you can separate work from home. I think there's a little bit of advantage. And I think, one of your guests, I think maybe in the last podcast, talked about he had a job where he was like lived right next door to his work.
Yeah.
And then he switched to a job where he had a commute, and how valuable it was to have that commute time to like decompress. So for me, I've had to I have an office, and when I come into this office, it's like I went to a building downtown. I treat it that way. I don't stop until it's lunchtime, and then I go eat my lunch and I come back and I come in my office and I close the door. My wife works from home, but I don't see her between 8 a.m. and noon. Hours. We might run into each other at lunch, we might not. And then I'll see her at 5 because I'm at work, and I have to kind of compartmentalize it like that a little bit.
Very disciplined.
But I don't get that. Yeah. Well, and I think that's the key. I don't get that opportunity to like decompress, but for me, that's then like going to the gym, exercise is like that opportunity to kind of clear your headspace. And, but it's hard. It's a difficult thing. And early in my career, when my kids were still at home, it was even harder because I traveled a lot, and, that makes it tough. But at the end of the day, just carving out time to like focus on family and your own health is important. But it can be a real challenge, especially in today's just world of Zoom meetings and works on your phone and you can't get away from it.
24/7.
Yeah.
Balance is very important.
Yeah. So if you get a really good answer to that, let me know.
I know we have to start collecting. I think I'm like, oh, we should take note of some of these questions and ask the same one and see who's figured it out. I think that's the key, is nobody's figured it out. So that's what I'm gathering. I'm like, we just figure it out as we go. Okay, so I have a couple of questions that are maybe, they're not millennial questions, but that's just what I think. So your 30-year-old self, if you could have a conversation, give him advice or just talk, what do you think that conversation would be about?
Yeah. I mean, so I'm having that conversation knowing the future, or just
looking back, if you could kind of give him a heads up, maybe, hey, here's some advice.
Yeah, I think I would just, say, hey, Mitch, keep grinding hard, work hard. Everything you do it the best that you can do it, and the doors will open. And I see it, with my kids or my kids' friends, that they kind of want that assurance. Like, before I exert this energy, I want some kind of guarantee that there's going to be a big reward at the end of it. And it's, 9 out of 10 times there isn't. But that 10th time makes it worth it. And I think, again, just for your own kind of mental health and well-being, it feels good to do good work. So I've done, worked really hard on a project, or even on like a sale, right? And lost. And, no one's going to be happy that you lost, but like, I kind of come home and I go, well, I know I put my best foot forward. I did everything the best that I could do, and that's the outcome. Much better than I kind of half-assed it and then lost, and then you have to sit there and wonder, well, I wonder if I would have actually applied myself. So I think, that would be the advice. Just do everything to the best of your ability, and everything will be fine.
That's good. That's good advice. Go for it. You have questions?
I do. So transitioning kind of away from the leadership, appreciate all of the insight in your story. So I've known you for 20, 21 years now. I've known your family. I didn't tell you I was going to ask this question, but can you take a couple of minutes and just tell us about how you met your wife? I love that story. I think everybody would love it. It's a great story.
One.
Yeah. So it's a good story. So I've known my wife since the second grade. Now, we were in the same second grade class in this small town that I talked about. Small town had one high school, but it had two middle schools. So as we were growing up, we went to separate middle schools. So those years, like, I didn't really know her. And then we came back to the same high school, and we were literally best friends through high school. We never dated, but we hung out together in a very kind of, our small group. And after graduating, we kind of went our separate ways. We actually have a couple of letters that we had written to people. Wrote letters back then. A couple of letters that we had actually mailed to each other. And funny that she kept them and I kept them as well. It's kind of, I think we both knew, but she went into the Marine Corps, and during that time, we got married, had a child, our daughter. I got out of college, had a son. Our 10-year reunion, we kind of meet up. At that time, we're both single, both with children, and started dating. Again, I was in Sacramento at the time. She was down in San Diego, and somehow I convinced her to move up to Sacramento, and the rest is kind of history. I think actually, before we were even married, I think we met Anthony and his beautiful wife, Amy.
Yeah, Michelle, Mitch's wife, is Amy's best friend. So I've always loved that story. So I just wanted to have you share it. So before we go into our inspiration, anything that you want to, what's your advice for people, or anything you want to leave off with?
I mean, I hadn't really thought about that, but I would, I think we've covered a lot of it. For me, it's, a I would say for the leaders out there, be, don't, well, I guess the way I would say it is, I always tell my team, the news is the news, and always report the news. And what I mean by that is like, everybody will tell me the good news. What people don't ever want to tell me is the bad news. But just the opposite is valuable to me. Like, I don't need, like, the good news is great and we should celebrate it, but I need the bad news. Like, that's what I'm here waiting for so I can do something about it. And if you don't tell me, like, I can't help fix that. So again, for the leaders out there, I would say, always encourage your team to report you the news. Never, ever like slap a hand for bringing you bad news. Like, that's, those are the golden nuggets that you can improve your company or whatever by understanding why that happened and correcting it. And then for those out there working for a leader or maybe striving to be a leader, trust those you work with. I think I've been in places where trust breaks down, and that can be really toxic really fast. But I like to go into every situation that the information I'm hearing, I trust it 100% until I have a reason not to. And I think if everybody kind of operates that way, it builds better teams. Now, and then obviously there's team building and stuff you can do to help, build that trust. But we should all start with it, I think, in a corporate environment. Until you have a reason not to.
It's great advice.
Yeah, I love that.
I do love it. All right, Inspire Thursday. The episodes come out on Thursday, and we like to talk about people inspired. It's one of the reasons we're doing this. But we appreciate you telling your story and giving people insight, different leadership styles, different stories, different journeys. So I'll start this week. And I've been talking a lot about my family, and I'm going to continue as my mom, Pam Lopez. She's inspired me my entire life. She is the heart and the rock of our family. She still lives with my dad, Lou. She takes care of him. She takes care of my sister, who's married and has 2 kids and lives on her own. She doesn't live with my mom, but I know my mom's taking care of her, my brother, and everybody. So just a true inspiration. She's selfless. If you need anything at all, you can go to my mom, and if you have an animal, she'll take it in, whether it's a dog, cat, crane, mouse. She'll take it in. So love you, Mom. So Mitch, who's your inspiration?
You guys still got me?
We still got you. Can you hear us, Mitch?
Oh, yeah, just came back. Sorry, I had a little hiccup on my end there.
No problem.
Were you asking me for mine, or or is Natasha up?
No, you're up, Mitch. Who's your inspiration?
So I was going to tease you about all your inspirations being family members.
That's why I got it out of the way.
But then I knew you were going to ask me this question, and thinking about it, I'm like, well, I kind of get it. I love all the members of my family, so this isn't any kind of ranking.
It's tough, huh? It gets tough, doesn't it?
I got to come on the show several more times so I can check them all off. No, but I think it would be my son. He just messaged me last week. He works for Enterprise, and he got out of school. He kind of took a job there. And, when he took the job, he's like, well, this is just like a temporary thing. Because his girlfriend's going through physician's assistant school. And he's like, so I'm going to do this till she's done with school. And then we're going to figure out where we want to live. And, then I'll kind of like start my career. And I told him, I'm like, son, I get it. Nobody in high school is saying, I just want to work at Enterprise someday. Like, if that could only happen. I go, but it's a great company. And they have a great reputation for like teaching people how to be great managers, and you should really embrace it and get everything you can out of it while you're there. Well, I like to think he took my advice and has been working really hard. He's just got promoted to assistant branch manager for one of the largest branches down in the Vegas area. Big promotion that he worked really hard on. So really excited about that. And it, again, I think I got a lot of work ethic inspiration from my parents, and to see him having this kind of success and working hard is now kind of like bubbling back up and re-energizing me as well. So, this week I would say it's my son Mason, and I just think what he's doing is awesome.
Oh, it's really cool. And I've known Mason, I don't know his whole life, but I've known him for a long time, and I've tried to recruit him. So Enterprise, keep developing him. We want him. So that's really cool. Thank you, Mitch. I want to see it on Facebook tomorrow, but thank you.
All right. You got it.
Yes, we have to share. All right, I'm up. So I'll keep it rolling with the family call outs, the kudos here. For me, my inspiration this week is my brother. His name's Christian. We got to spend some time over the weekend together, and life is busy as we've gotten older. We're not, hanging out every day or talking. And so sometimes we'll go with some gaps in between. And him and I probably could not be more different. So our lives are different. But he has overcome some struggles and he's working really hard. And I was enlightened or refreshed to see him at a job that he loves and passionate about it, probably for the first time in his life. So to talk to him about that and just feel that was really inspiring for me. He's a great dad. He has 2 sons, my nephews, and he's just putting in a lot of self-work and hard work right now. And so I see it, and it's always great to see that from somebody who's bettering themselves. So, yep, Christian, when you listen, love you. And it's him.
Love it.
It's I tease about it, but it is, I think, interesting to me how much like our own families inspire us, and like you don't really think of it that way, and you think about work all the time, but it's really at home a lot of times can really be the source of a lot of inspiration for all of us.
Yeah, and to give credit to it, I think sometimes we could take it for granted. So I think that's important.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, this has been a fun little journey doing our Inspire Thursday and just talking about people. It really makes you think from week to week. So it's been fun. So Mitch, I really appreciate you coming on, supporting us, having the conversation, telling your story. So thank you, Natasha.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a fantastic conversation. Really great insights. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think...
No, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Good. All right. Is that it?
That's it.
All right. Gramps, Millennial, and Mitch out.